Before I present or commence the discussion on this historic legislation, I wish to express my condolences to the family of the late Speaker, Speaker Donald Alsey, who presided over this House, and I wish to express my condolences to his family on his death. I also, Mr. Speaker, wish to apologize to the members of the public who suffered some inconvenience from the delay in getting their new e-passports. Anytime there is change, Mr. Speaker, there is always some level of dislocation, and I want to assure them that all those who paid $80 for their passport before the 25th of July, they will not be asked to pay anything more than the $80 that they paid previously. And also, Mr. Speaker, the passport that they have presently can still be used for travel and still be used for other purposes. So if there is not an urgent need to travel, there is no need to want to change your passport now if there is not an urgent need, or if your passport has not expired. If your passport has not expired, you can still use your old passport to travel. So there is no need to be on the lines if your passport has not expired. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Minister and the staff and the people in immigration for making that transition to e-passports, it's at the top edge of the passport business, and we hope that everything works as is customary, Mr. Speaker. So having said so, I am very pleased that St. Lucians have access to the e-passport. Mr. Speaker, in the election of 2021, the government that the people of St. Lucia chose, on its platform, there was a lot of talk about good governance. And I want to quote from page 51 of our manifesto, Mr. Speaker. And I want to quote, during my budget address, also in our manifesto, but I want to quote today from the budget address, which is already a document of this House. Mr. Speaker, on page 51, in the run-up to the last general elections, my party committed to ushering in a new era of good governance with zero tolerance for corruption in the administration of public affairs. Mr. Speaker, quite apart from our core beliefs, our policy position was in response to an outcry for justice from the people of St. Lucia for the abuses which were being committed by the last UWP administration. Mr. Speaker, St. Lucia had witnessed a massive decline in its corruption index global rating. Therefore, we promised to stop the slide and restore our country's reputation to good international standings. Mr. Speaker, good governance protects the citizens of a country from abusive administrations who use state resources for the benefit of a few at the expense of the majority. It assures that the government is accountable, transparent, equitable, and inclusive, and law-abiding. We cannot allow corruption to take deep root in the administration of government affairs and its statutory agencies. We know that corruption breeds inefficiency, illegal appropriation of wealth, wastage of resources, and disregards the interests and needs of the most vulnerable. Mr. Speaker, with this in light, we stated, we are at the advanced stage of preparation for enacting the relevant legislation to appoint a special prosecutor to conduct investigations into acts of alleged public corruption. And Mr. Speaker, this is the act which I have the honor to present in this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, we are not reinventing the wheel here. There have been several acts of that nature in the region. The Special Prosecutor Bill in St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker, is based on the Jamaican Corruption Prevention and Special Prosecutor Acts. The Jamaica Act promotes and strengthens measures to prevent and combat corrupt conduct more efficiently and effectively, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, that act was challenged in relation to the Director of Public Prosecutions, and it was not successful, Mr. Speaker. The Special Prosecutor, also, there's a Special Prosecutor in British Columbia. It's called the Crown Counsel Act. In Ghana, passed in 2017, in the United States of America, and in Australia, Mr. Speaker. So we are not reinventing the wheel here, nor are we doing anything special to go on any witch hunt, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this act is not about a witch hunt. This act is about having St. Lucia as a place where corruption is not tolerated or encouraged, whether for politicians or for public officials. This is the object of the act, Mr. Speaker. The act doesn't in any way conflict with the duties of the Office of the Director of Prosecutions. But, Mr. Speaker, we know, and the Director of Prosecutions said himself that he's overwhelmed. He said that there are over 90 cases of murder in the system which he cannot deal with, Mr. Speaker. So if we cannot wait, Mr. Speaker, we cannot wait for the Director of Public Prosecutions whilst the very core of our existence is being threatened, Mr. Speaker, by acts or perceived acts of corruption, Mr. Speaker. And I turn to Section 8, the powers of the Special Prosecutor. It says, subject to the powers of the Director of Public Prosecutions under Section 73 of the Constitution of St. Lucia. The Special Prosecutor may perform any function in relation to the institution carrying on and withdrawal of a prosecution for an offense against the laws of St. Lucia, or may prosecute a matter in his or her name. And under Section 8.3, Mr. Speaker, it says, the Special Prosecutor shall not withdraw a matter instituted or referred to him or her by the Director of Public Prosecutions unless the Director of Public Prosecutions consents in writing. So what it says, Mr. Speaker, if the Director of Public Prosecutions begins a matter, the Special Prosecutor cannot interfere. So the fear that the powers of the Director of Public Prosecution are being diminished or belittled is clearly shown, Mr. Speaker. That is not the case as it is shown in the law, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, but we believe, it's our fundamental belief, Mr. Speaker, that public officials, and I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, what is a public official as is in the Act. A public official includes a member of Parliament or a person having official duties under an enactment or a former public official, Mr. Speaker. So that means, Mr. Speaker, even if you are a member of Parliament at the time and you are no longer a member of Parliament and it's found that there is need for an investigation, Mr. Speaker, being a former member of Parliament will not protect you. So former public officials, that includes member of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, are still under the jurisdiction of the Special Prosecutor if necessary, Mr. Speaker. And the point of emphasis is if necessary. You see, Mr. Speaker, this government, we want to usher a new level of governance in this country. There have been too many accusations that have gone on that have not been investigated. This is not a witch hunt, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you can't have a situation where government spends millions of dollars, Mr. Speaker, millions of dollars, and the people involved are not called to account for the use of that money. It's not legislation for us or for them. It's legislation to uplift the level of governance in this country. It is legislation that will make St. Lucia stand out as a country where there is zero tolerance towards corruption. And that is the mantra under which we campaigned, Mr. Speaker. There have been too many instances, Mr. Speaker, where public officials have disregarded statements by technocrats. Statements like the cost of desilting a river was unconscionable. And there has been absolutely no discussion on that, Mr. Speaker. There are too many times where in this country, jobs that were valued at $650,000 end up costing $3 million, Mr. Speaker, for the same job. And the public officials had the guts, to use a local word, to say this is unconscionable, and nothing was done, Mr. Speaker. That cannot happen. That should not happen, Mr. Speaker. And all we are saying is that if it is found, and I want to make it clear, this is not a situation where we are going after anyone, because this bill also pertains to us in this honorable house. It pertains to us. What we want to do is to ensure that the taxpayers of this country, that their money is adequately spent and not spent on enriching or making other people's pockets, Mr. Speaker, either for themselves, their friends, or their family, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've made it clear that the special prosecutor does not affect the director of public prosecutions. I want to, Mr. Speaker, to bring your attention to part 1 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, of the Act, the Special Prosecutor. And it says, the Judicial and Legal Services Commission shall, in consultation with the Attorney General, appoint an attorney at law to be a special prosecutor. So that person is not a political appointee. He's appointed by the Judicial and Legal Services Commission. And Section 42, Mr. Speaker, speaks to the attorney at law appointed under subsection 1 shall have at least 10 years experience in the practice of law. 10 years experience. To be a judge, Mr. Speaker, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you need 7 years experience. But in that case, to ensure that the official is of high repute and highly experienced, the law says that he must have at least 10 years in experience in the practice of the law, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Act speaks to how the special prosecutor can be disqualified if he has filed for bankruptcy, or if he is declared by a court to be a bankrupt, if he is unable to discharge the functions of his or her office, whether arising from infirmity of body or mind or any other cause, if it's found to have committed professional misconduct under Section 45 of the Legal Professions Act and is removed from the role under Section 29, is convicted of a criminal offense, except if the offense is a minor traffic offense or is spent in accordance with the criminal records or is a member of parliament. So a member of parliament cannot be a special prosecutor, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Act outlines the functions of the special prosecutor. The functions of the special prosecutor are to receive a complaint of corrupt conduct from any person and investigate the corrupt conduct. To investigate corrupt conduct on his or her own motion. To institute a criminal prosecution or civil claim. Criminal or civil. So that means he can ask for you to go to jail or he can ask for you to pay back. Criminal or civil. In any court against a public officer or public official if the conduct of the public officer or public official appears to the special prosecutor on reasonable grounds to involve corrupt conduct. To prosecute a criminal offense or civil claim instituted by him or her in the courts. To prosecute a criminal offense for corrupt conduct referred to him or her by a director of public prosecutions. That means the director of public prosecutions can ask the special prosecutor to prosecute a criminal offense if in case he or she doesn't have the time, Mr. Speaker. And to pursue, coordinate, and supervise civil recovery. The special prosecutor may investigate and prosecute a public officer or public official for a criminal offense or prosecute a civil claim for corrupt conduct committed by a public officer or public official in the course of his or her public office or public duties under an enactment, and for this purpose the special prosecutor is deemed to have the authority to investigate, institute, carry on, or do any other thing and then exercise any other function under this enactment, Mr. Speaker. And to do that, the special prosecutor will have a staff, and the staff could consist of attorney at laws, investigators, administrative and other ancillary staff required for the efficient discharge of the function of the special prosecutor. And the staff of the special prosecutor are public officers. It's important to note that, Mr. Speaker. They are public officers, the staff of the special prosecutor, Mr. Speaker. And the special prosecutor, if you look at section 19, it says, prior to commencement of duties, the special prosecutor, acting special prosecutor, attorneys at law, investigators, administrative and auxiliary staff shall take the prescribed oath or affirmations of appointment and secrecy. And secrecy, Mr. Speaker. Oh, Mr. Speaker, the Act speaks to the powers of the special prosecutor, and I've outlined before, subject to the powers of the Director of Public Prosecutions on the substance Section 73 of the Constitution of St. Lucia, the special prosecutor may perform any function in relation to the institution, carried on and withdrawal of a prosecution for an offense against the laws of St. Lucia, and may prosecute a matter in his or her name, subject to the powers of the Director of Public Prosecution. Where the special prosecutor institutes a prosecution against a person, the special prosecutor may withdraw the matter and the court shall discharge the defendant. The special prosecutor shall not withdraw a matter instituted or referred to him by him or her by the Director of Public Prosecutions unless the Director of Public Prosecutions consents in writing. And I'm repeating that, Mr. Speaker, because there are those who may want to create the usual mischief by trying to relate the Director of Public Prosecutions to the Special Prosecutor, Mr. Speaker. There are two distinct positions, but if the Director of Public Prosecutions institutes a criminal or civil action, the Special Prosecutor cannot stop it. Cannot stop it. So the Director of Public Prosecutions, his independence remains pristine. He cannot stop it unless the Director of Public Prosecutions consents in writing. There's absolutely no conflict between the roles of the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Special Prosecutor. Absolutely no conflict, Mr. Speaker. The Special Prosecutor may, with the approval of the Attorney General, engage on the agreements in writing persons having suitable qualifications and experience as consultants to perform service for Special Prosecutor. And Mr. Speaker, there is nothing new in that, Mr. Speaker. You've heard about these exorbitant legal fees that have been charged. And Mr. Speaker, there are more legal fees that are being considered. There are legal fees that are being considered, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that this honorable House, those who have the information, will tell the people of this country why were these legal fees so exorbitant and who promised to pay what to who and how much. Mr. Speaker, the special prosecutor is deemed to have the powers of the Director of Public Prosecution under enactment, except for the powers exclusively given to the Director of Public Prosecutions under the Constitution of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Act speaks to the duration of the appointment. The special prosecutor holds office for a period not exceeding 5 years and is specified in the instrument of his or her appointment. The special prosecutor may resign his or her office by written notice to the Judicial and Legal Services Commission, Mr. Speaker. There is provision for the appointment of an acting special prosecutor, Mr. Speaker. The Act speaks in section 13 to the removal of the special prosecutor. And it says, the special prosecutor may be removed from office for inability to exercise the functions of his or her office without arising from infirmity of body or mind or another cause, or for misbehavior, Mr. Speaker. The special prosecutor shall be removed from office if the question of his or her removal from the office under the subsection 1 is referred to the Judicial and Legal Services Commission by the Attorney General for investigation and determination, and if subsequent to the investigation, the Judicial and Legal Service Commission recommends to the Permanent Secretary and Minister responsible for the public service that the special prosecutor must be removed, Mr. Speaker. So there's a whole series of processes, Mr. Speaker, in which you can remove the special prosecutor. A whole series of processes, Mr. Speaker. Where the question of removing the special prosecutor has been referred to the Judicial and Legal Services Commission under this section, and the Judicial and Legal Services Commission advises the Permanent Secretary and the Ministry responsible for the public service to suspend the special prosecutor from the exercise of his or her functions pending the outcome of the investigation. The special prosecutor shall be suspended. Mr. Speaker, it is not a willy-nilly situation. A situation where there are clear procedures, Mr. Speaker, because this is very serious legislation, Mr. Speaker. I've spoken about the staff of the Special Prosecutor Office as in Section 15, Mr. Speaker. Then we've spoken about, Mr. Speaker, the appointment of investigators, administrative and ancillary staff, Mr. Speaker. You see, Mr. Speaker, the Special Prosecutor will have attorneys at law working in his office, Mr. Speaker. That is to ensure that there is balance and also to ensure that the fees that are charged are in line with usual normal practice. But what if the staff are in the office, Mr. Speaker, then it's different, Mr. Speaker. And I want to also say that if the staff are on contract, they are public officers. If they are on contract, there will be specific terms and conditions, Mr. Speaker. But as is the case in the public service, Mr. Speaker, if they are public officers not on contract, their salary must be what is stipulated in the estimate of expenditure for that level of officer. That's right, Mr. Chair. That is clear, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we spoke about the oath of secrecy, Section 19, disclosure of interest. If this, again, Mr. Speaker, that is to avoid conflict of interest, to avoid internal manipulation and insider trading, Mr. Speaker. Disclosure of interest. The special prosecutor, acting special prosecutor, attorneys at law and investigators shall immediately give written notice to the Attorney General of a direct or indirect interest adverse to his or her functions under this act. So you cannot be judge, jury, and executioner. So you cannot sit as special prosecutor and you have an interest in the activity that is taking place, or your brother has an interest, or your father has an interest, or your sister has an interest, you cannot sit as special prosecutor. There needs to be that division, because when you decide that you want to go into public life, Mr. Speaker, you're actually making a sacrifice. And that sacrifice comes with obligations. You cannot expect to be in public life and want to be the same as someone in private life. You cannot have your cake and eat it. You must make the sacrifice that public life entails. You can't want to be in public life for power. You can't want to be in public life to victimize people. You can't want to be in public life to use your power and say, I did it because I could. You cannot want to be in public life and at the same time be in private life. You have to make your choices. And this act ensures that these choices are made. Public officials, parliamentarians must make the necessary sacrifice and exercise the necessary restraint and constraint when they are public officials. That is clear. So that means that if you entered politics, and let's say you had a minibus, and within that term of office, Mr. Speaker, you found yourself with what? A plane? No. And you found yourself within that term of office, you find yourself with a 4-story building with an elevator. And when you entered office, everybody can see what you entered office with. Use me as an example. Everybody can see what I entered office with. I still live in the same place. That's what I entered office with. Anybody can see. But if you enter, and after 4 years, before you were there, you had a minibus. And because you know how to use money, after 4 years, Mr. Speaker, you have these vivid signs of wealth. Somebody should ask you, where did you get that money from? We're not saying that you stole it. We're not saying that you got it through any legal means. All we are saying is that if you are public official, if you are parliamentarian, you must be able to account for where your wealth came from if you do not enter politics with it. That's all we are saying. That's all we are saying, Mr. Speaker. So what we are saying is that bill will ensure that if there is a complaint, if somebody says that this public official told me, and he can prove, to give me this contract and put on this contract something for me, put on this contract something for me, for my personal use, Mr. Speaker. This act says that if it is proven, that person, if it's proven, Mr. Speaker, under part 2, it says a public officer or public official shall not engage in corrupt conduct. A public officer or public official who contravenes subsection 1 commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $300,000 or to imprisonment for a term of 5 years or to both. On conviction or indictment, to a fine of $1 million or to imprisonment for a term of 10 years or both, Mr. Speaker. Last week in this Honorable House, we increased the penalties for firearms and firearm offenses. This week in this Honorable House, we are increasing the penalties for the offense of corruption against the state of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, the act further, and that is very important, because we know about threats that have been made to public officers, and have been made to civil servants, and have been made to officials. I'm the boss. If you talk, you know what will happen to you. Keep quiet. I say do it, do it. Whether it's right or wrong, Mr. Speaker, this act makes provisions for how a complaint is taken to the special prosecutor, and it protects people making that complaint. Because, Mr. Speaker, we live in a society of fear, of concern. Mr. Speaker. Many things that happen that makes people afraid to talk. And many times people tell you, like, since I'm Prime Minister, people come to me and say, this thing happened, Prime Minister, but don't mention my name, eh? Many times, don't mention my name, eh? They are afraid, Mr. Speaker. This act protects them, Mr. Speaker. So, listen to how a complaint is brought to the special prosecutor. I want to make it abundantly clear. This law is there for us too, you know. It's not there for any one set of public officials. It is there for us in this honorable house. And every day I speak to my colleagues, these laws are there for us also. The same way when the last government increased the statute of limitations, what it was? Yes, they increased it to indefinite because they were looking to get some, they were looking to find something. They were directed at some people. They were looking to find something on somebody. So they increased it. We never shouted. We did not say a word. We sat in this honorable house and we kept quiet and we said, I think the member for Beaufort South said, pass your law, pass your law. They came and they extended the statute of limitations to say that if you committed offense in 1 year, some of them said after 7 years it could have been wiped out. They increased it. They said indefinitely. So if you do it in year 1 and they catch you in year 40, you're in trouble. We said nothing. We never complained. We never. The record will show. The opposition at the time never complained. We said, Membaton qui bat chien noir, qui bat chien blanc. So we said nothing, Mr. Speaker. We said nothing. And I've challenged them. I've sat in this honorable house, in this side, and I've said to them, if any of you have anything against me, bring it up. So there's no need for them to be screaming at the special prosecutor. Why are people screaming at the fact that we are keeping an election promise and put an act in Parliament that affects us also? Why is there such a hue and cry? Why before the bill comes into being, you want to ask me to investigate what? Your time will come. Bring a complaint and ask the president, do you have to investigate, Mr. Speaker? Why the problems? Why the problems? Section 25. Complaint to the special prosecutor. A person who has reasonable grounds to believe that a public official or public official is in breach of this act, has committed an act of corruption, will make a complaint in writing. It says the process now. You don't make it on Facebook, you make it in writing. Under subsection 1, the particulars of the breach or act of corruption, the particulars as far as known of the public officer or public official against whom the complaint is made. So if you're saying that somebody has a house in Canada or in Miami and you don't know how they got it, you need to be able to prove that on Avenue 1-2 there's a house which belongs to a particular person, and how did the person get the money to buy it. You need to be to have it with proof. So when you write this report, he will determine, Mr. Speaker, the particulars as far as known of the public officer or public official against whom the complaint is made, and other prescribed particulars. It goes on to section 6, protection of persons making complaints. When a person makes a complaint to the special prosecutor under section 25 in good faith and reasonably believing that the complaint made and any allegations contained in it as substantially true, and in the circumstances it is reasonable for him or her to make the complaint, he or she is not liable to any form of reprisal or any suit, whether civil or criminal. A person shall not in the course of employment take reprisal against a person who makes a complaint under subsection 1. So if somebody makes a complaint under a particular government and this government changes, the act says you cannot take reprisals against that person. A person who contravenes subsection 2 commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $300,000 or to imprisonment for a term of 5 years or to both, on conviction or indictment, to a fine of $1 million or to imprisonment for a term of 10 years or both. Under section 27, Mr. Speaker, it speaks to the rejection of a complaint by the special prosecutor. The special prosecutor may, on receipt of a complaint under section 25, and after examining the complaint, reject the complaint if the special prosecutor is of opinion that the complaint is frivolous, does not pertain to a matter the special prosecutor is empowered to deal with under this act. What it says, Mr. Speaker, that if the complaint is frivolous, if somebody just, like, you know, what do you call it, Chimay bon la place? If it's somebody just Chimay Parole bon la place, Bolawi. If it's a Parole Bolawi, Mr. Speaker, the special prosecutor can dismiss it as frivolous and dismiss it. So everybody can't just say what they want. The special prosecutor can dismiss it, Mr. Speaker. It goes further, Mr. Speaker. Investigation of a breach. When the special prosecutor decides that there's been some need for investigation, where it's written in section 28, where an examination of a complaint made under subsection 25 or otherwise, the special prosecutor is of the view that an investigation is necessary to ascertain whether public officer or public official has committed a breach of this act or other enactment, he or she shall investigate the matter. Under section 29, on the conclusion of investigation under section 28, and whether the special prosecutor is satisfied that the public officer or public official must be prosecuted for an offense under section 24 or make another or under other enactment, the special prosecutor shall institute and undertake proceedings against the public official or public official or public officer or public official, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, then on the schedule, Mr. Speaker, it determines what is called corrupt conduct. And that section is very important, Mr. Speaker. What is corrupt conduct? Corrupt conduct in relation to public officer, public official includes soliciting or accepting an undue advantage for himself or self or for another person. Performing or refraining from performing his or her public functions for the purpose of obtaining an undue advantage for himself or for another person. That is called omission, the sin of omission. If you decide that you're just not dealing with that because it will affect you or somebody close to you. Promising, offering, or giving to a person an undue advantage to perform or refrain from performing his or her official function. So if, Mr. Speaker, it can be proven that you promise a man you'll give him a contract to build an airport, and in return you will give him something, Mr. Speaker, the public prosecutor can investigate it. Abusing his or her real or supposed influence to obtain an undue advantage for himself or herself or for another person. Abusing his or her real or supposed influence to obtain an undue advantage for himself or herself or for another person. Abusing his or her real or supposed influence. So if you use your power, Mr. Speaker, your influence to give an undue advantage to yourself or another person, Mr. Speaker, that is considered corrupt conduct. Misbehavior in public office, misfeasance in public office, fraudulently using or concealing property or another benefit. Fraudulently using or concealing property or another benefit, offering or granting directly or indirectly to another public officer or public official an article, money, or other benefit, being a gift, favor, promise, or advantage to the public officer, public official, or another person for doing an act of omitting to do an act in the performance of the other public officers or public officials' public function. In other words, bribery. Allowing his or her private interests to conflict with his or her public duties, or improperly influence his or her conduct in the performance of his or her public duties. Allowing his or her private interests to conflict with his or her public duties, or improperly influence his or her conduct in the performance of his or her public duties. Offering or granting directly or indirectly to a person performing a public function in a foreign state an article of money or other benefit, being a gift, favor, promise, or advantage in connection with an economic or commercial transaction for an act to be performed or omitted to be performed by that person in the performance of the person's public functions. Acquiring, directly or indirectly, property or resources disproportionate to his or her legitimate sources of income, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is extremely important and should be noted. Acquiring, directly or indirectly, property or resource disproportionate to his or her legitimate sources of income, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is very powerful legislation. It's a very powerful legislation, and I agree, it's powerful and serious, Mr. Speaker. And that is why there must be balance. There must be balance, Mr. Speaker. Public officials are called upon now to have the highest level of behavior. Their behavior now is under scrutiny, Mr. Speaker. All public and former public officials, Mr. Speaker. And it means, Mr. Speaker, that we may have to look at the way that they're compensated. Because right now, Mr. Speaker, we are saying that we have raised the bar in terms of behavior of public officials. We have really raised the bar, Mr. Speaker. And this legislation is revolutionary. It's taken a leap of faith in the conduct of our public officials. It is saying to us that this government will not tolerate any real or perceived level of corruption. And it's saying that anyone who has an idea or who believes that there is any corruption or an act of corruption, they have the right to report the person to a matured, experienced, apolitical special prosecutor who will look into it and decide what is right and what is wrong, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is clear. It is clear that we want to be a shining example of good governance in the region. It's not a time for talk, Mr. Speaker. It's a time where we are putting our money where our mouth is. We spoke about corruption. We spoke about the elimination of corruption, Speaker. And now we are giving the public the means and the resources to investigate corruption, anybody in the public can make a complaint once it's not frivolous and vexatious to the spirit. Anybody can make a complaint and it can be investigated, Mr. Speaker, and we should find whether it is right or whether it's wrong, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this means that in government we must embrace honesty, we must embrace accountability, and we must look as government as being a service to others, a service to people. You cannot be in government and your main aim is to victimize people or to get rich or to take advantage of people because of your position. You have to look at government as a form of service, a form of improving people's lives, a form of making people's quality of life better. This is why you're in government. We're not in government, you ought not to be in government to boost our egos. We ought not to be in government to settle scores. We ought to be in government to put people first. We ought to be in government to ensure that people's quality of life improves, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, speaking about that, Mr. Speaker, this St. Lucia really belongs to all of us. And yesterday, and it amazes me, Mr. Speaker, when I see what people tell the world about St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. Just because they want to score some level of political gain, Mr. Speaker. I come to a situation of crime, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, there was a post in social media of a 2004 on the opposition media. A 2004 posting. The 2004 was taken out. It was erased. And it appears that if the situation was happening now. This is because what gain? To use a phrase, ki gain, kiasa. But this time it's not for computers. I mean, why are you just because, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, just because.
Front foot, you want to be on the front foot. Front foot, that is just that now.
Just because, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Front foot.
The quality of political discourse in St. Lucia has deteriorated to such an extent, Mr. Speaker. It's amazing, Mr. Speaker, it's amazing. But Mr. Speaker, it's time for us to stop the talk, and it's time for us to walk the walk, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and for those who may say that the authority of certain positions is affected by this act, and as usual, we're playing politics and this and that, under Section 3, Mr. Speaker, it says, this act does not affect, I've said so before, I want to repeat it, the authority of the Director of Public Prosecutions under Section 73 of the Constitution of St. Lucia. The Attorney General, it does not affect the authority of the Attorney General to prosecute a civil claim or to discontinue or withdraw a civil claim on behalf of the government. It does not affect the integrity of the Parliamentary Commissioner under Section 112 of the Constitution of St. Lucia. It does not affect the Authority of Integrity Commission under Section 119 of the Constitution of St. Lucia, nor does it affect the integrity of the Financial Intelligence Authority under the Money Laundering Prevention Act. So it doesn't affect any of these authorities, Mr. Speaker. It doesn't affect any of these authorities, Mr. Speaker. It does not. Mr. Speaker, speaking about misinformation and downright untruths, Mr. Speaker, again there was a post in social media saying that we're increasing VAT today.
Front foot.
Mr. Speaker, how is it possible for the government to come to Parliament today to increase VAT? Or last week it was, I had increased VAT already. My position on VAT is clear, very clear, very clear. I want to say today and now in this honorable house that this government has not increased VAT. We have not increased VAT, and the VAT rate remains the same. I want to make it abundantly, and according to a friend of mine, pollucily clear, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, this act is a quantum leap into good government, Mr. Speaker. St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker, must become a beacon of hope in the region. A beacon of hope, where those who wish to invest in the country should not feel coerced by any official who demands bribes to secure facilitation of the intended investment, Mr. Speaker. And talking about investment, Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to tell you that the interest for investment in St. Lucia has increased, has improved, Mr. Speaker. You see for yourself. You can see for yourself, Mr. Speaker. If you drive by Halcyon, Sanders Halcyon, you see an extension going on to the hotel. I'm very pleased that extension going, Mr. Speaker. It's been built now. It's been built now, Mr. Speaker. And we signed the hotel for Choiseul. The member of for Choiseul is very happy, Mr. Speaker. He's very happy, Mr. Speaker. And no problem, Mr. Speaker. We're doing it now, Mr. Speaker. But the fact is, Mr. Mr. Speaker, it is happening now. That is what's important. It's not a promise. It's not a promise. It is not a promise of $1.2 billion of investment to happen in the next year. It is the reality that as we speak, is happening now. And that, Mr. Speaker, is the difference, Mr. Speaker. We do not, again, Mr. Speaker, we do not wish St. Lucia bad. And that is why this legislation affects all of us, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, there are people who make it their duty to not only wish, but to speculate and to predict bad for St. Lucia. Make it their duty, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased that my colleagues have agreed that those who put themselves up to serve the people of St. Lucia must do just that, to serve the people of St. Lucia and not themselves. Our politics in St. Lucia must not be seen as a path to get rich fast. It is morally wrong to sing so and to behave as if it was so, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, George Charles, our founder, our father, our hero, when he left politics, he was criticized for leaving politics poor. It is said that a politician ought not to leave politics poor, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we think that this is wrong. You should not get into politics to become rich, Mr. Speaker. You should not. No one sent to call you to get into politics. When you get into politics, Mr. Speaker, you must come understanding that it comes to sacrifice, Mr. Speaker. And this is what this legislation speaks to, Mr. Speaker. And Speaker, as Prime Minister, I intend to make my tenure in office a period where politicians begin to put people first, to be honest, to be accountable, and to be selfless, Mr. Speaker. That is how I want to be remembered, Mr. Speaker. I don't want to be remembered as a Prime Minister who gets involved in hostility and hatred and victimization and division and untruths and on peddling, Mr. Speaker. That's not how I want to be remembered, Mr. Speaker. I want to be remembered as a Prime Minister who tried to improve the quality of life, not only the physical quality of life, Mr. Speaker, but the quality of life of our mentality, of our state of mind. I want to live in this country where St. Lucians feel proud of their country, Mr. Speaker. Where St. Lucians are proud to be St. Lucians. Where St. Lucians believe that colonialism was an evil And that is why we celebrated Emancipation Day in August, Mr. Speaker, where we are not afraid of our history, where we believe we have to learn from the mistakes of the past and improve it in the present and make it better in the future, Mr. Speaker. When we leave government, we want to leave a better country. A country when people will not believe that these politicians are crooks. A country where people will not say, where no politician will ever say, when I commit crime on my own. And if any of my ministers ever make this statement, I say it publicly. If any of my ministers ever say in public, when they commit crime, they commit their own, I will fire them. You cannot tolerate that level of ill discipline in your cabinet, in a cabinet. No prime minister, Mr. Speaker, no matter who the minister is. No prime minister should tolerate that level of largesse and say whatever you want and disrespect in parliament of people, Mr. Speaker. No prime minister should, and this prime minister will not tolerate it, Mr. Speaker. This prime minister will tolerate a higher level of governance, a call to serve, not a call to be rich, a call to make a contribution to the people of the country, not a call to make a contribution to your friends, your family. And this is why this legislation is serious legislation. It's very serious legislation. And each and every member of the cabinet and member of the party was warned that this is serious legislation, Mr. Speaker, very serious. And truth be told, each one of us, after discussion, we agreed that it was serious legislation. And we agreed to support it because our intention is to follow the law and to improve the level of governance in the country. Our intention is for a child to want to say that I want to be a politician. And I want to say that all these politicians are, you know what they say about some politicians. It's a law that says that all politicians are not the same. That we are leading by example, Mr. Speaker. We are coming to this honorable house and define what is corrupt conduct in clear terms that everyone can read it. What we feel is corrupt conduct. This is what this government is all about. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that we know that when we leave government, we will have St. Lucia will be a better place than when we took it over, Mr. Speaker. And that is our intention, to make St. Lucia a better place, Mr. Speaker. Not fall in the same malaise, in the same lies and misinformation and that we found it in Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask honorable members to support this act, and I want to reiterate that it is very serious legislation. It's legislation that speaks to governance. It's legislation that speaks to moral justice. It's legislation that speaks to transparency. It's legislation that speaks to accountability. It's legislation that speaks to us not depriving the people of this country because we want to make ourselves rich. It's legislation that speaks to the delivery of goods and services for an affordable price and not for an inflated price to assist our friends. That's what this legislation is all about. Our politics must change, Mr. Speaker. The way we conduct our politics must change. And when the people of St. Lucia voted for us in July last year, they voted for change. They voted for us to change the way things are done in St. Lucia. And this act is the continuation of that change, Mr. Speaker. I thank you.